Okay, the next item of business is a debate on motion 18016 in the name of Shirley-Ann Somerville on progressing National Advisory Council on Women and Girls recommendations on equality. I'd invite members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Shirley-Ann Somerville to speak to and move the motion. Cabinet Secretary, around 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I move the motion in my name. Today, the Scottish Government published its first annual statement following recommendations from the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls. It describes the actions the Government has taken to improve the lives of women and girls and towards gender equality. There remains much to do to tackle the challenges, barriers and dangers that women and girls still face, but the Scottish Government is committed to accelerating equality. And at the end of this afternoon's debate, my hope is that members will recognise the range of positive measures that we've taken towards gender equality in Scotland, and many of which would not have been possible without the cross-party support of the Chamber. The UN Sustainable Goals tell us that gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous and sustainable world. Reflecting that, equality for women and girls is a priority for this Government and at the heart of our vision for a fair and a prosperous Scotland. The Advisory Council on Women and Girls was established in 2018 to advise Government and others on what more we need to do to achieve gender equality. It makes recommendations to the Scottish Government, which we accepted and are implementing. Latterly, it has focused on accountability, scrutinising how we are delivering on its recommendations. The publication of today's annual statement is a recommendation of the Council, intended to support greater accountability. And I want to extend my thanks to the Council and to the Empowering Women's panel for their work to scrutinise our progress. While I am pleased to discuss the range of important work that this Government is taking forward, it remains clear that there is much more to do, and we are determined to deliver for women and girls and to address inequality wherever it arises. In 2021, we published our first Women's Health Plan, and we are currently working on the next phase, which we intend to publish later this year. Our first plan led to the appointment of Scotland's first Women's Health Champion, a new Women's Health Platform on NHS Inform, the development of new endometriosis care pathways, greater choice and access to contraceptives for women at community pharmacies, and the creation of specialist menopause services in every mainland health board. And I'll give
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for taking the intervention. It's on the point on the Women's Health Plan, and I'm wondering whether the Cabinet Secretary agrees with me that the situation for disabled women, particularly in Glasgow, to access cervical smear tests and the difficulty in making sure they've got accessible rooms for those, including in GP surgeries, is not an acceptable position, and that more should be done to support GPs in the NHS to make sure that their services are accessible to disabled women.
Cabinet Secretary, and give the time back.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank Pam Duncan-Glancy for that comment? And she points to, and probably not for the first time today, the discussion which is exceptionally important that's about intersectionality, and the fact that we no longer can and should just be talking about women, but we need to recognise the additional challenges and barriers that are facing women, whether it's disabled women or whether it's black minority ethnic women or other women that they have in facing and accessing public services. And she raises a very important point there, Presiding Officer, which I would agree is unacceptable. Presiding Officer, in the next phase of the plan, timely access to gynaecology services will be a priority. And we've allocated over £8.8 million to health boards to target long waiting times for gynaecology, and expect this to deliver significant improvements in the coming year. In addition, work is underway to target cervical cancer, identifying steps that we can take to eliminate it in our lifetimes. We've invested over £53 million since 2018 to fund access to free period products across a range of settings. And through the Period Products Free Provision Scotland Act 2021, Scotland became the first country in the world to enshrine access to free period products in law. We continue to target all forms of violence against women and girls through our world-leading strategy Equally Safe, and by strengthening the laws that enable us to respond robustly to perpetrators and to protect women and girls. In 2018, the Scottish Parliament passed the bill which became the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act 2018, creating a specific offence of domestic abuse that covers both physical and psychological abuse and making it easier to prosecute coercive and controlling behaviour. Today, another bill, the Criminal Justice Modernisation Bill, currently at stage 3, proposes to create a statutory framework for Scotland's first national multi-agency domestic homicide and suicide review model. We've taken action to create a trauma-informed process for people who have experienced sexual violence, including the Forensic Medical Services Victims of Sexual Offences Scotland Act 2021. The Act provides a statutory basis for health boards to provide person-centred, trauma-informed forensic medical services for people who have experienced rape or sexual assault. Since 2017, we have invested over £17 million to enable sexual assault response coordination services to be provided in every health board area. And, Presiding Officer, we have also increased public sector pay in Scotland, despite significant constraints in our budget. Increasing women's pay helps to reduce child poverty, one of the Scottish Government's 4 priorities. In 25 to 26, we are investing £155 million to enable an increase in the pay of adult and children's social care workers in commission services to the new real living wage rate of £12.60 per hour. This overwhelmingly benefits women, who make up the majority of the workforce. Scotland also has the most generous childcare offer in the UK. Parents of all 3- and 4-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds can access up to 30 hours of funded childcare each week in school term time. Supporting families by providing quality, affordable and accessible childcare supports women in work and keeps families out of poverty. I'll give way to Megan
Gallagher.
For giving way on the point of childcare, because there are councils right across the country who are not actually allowing eligible 2- and 3-year-olds to access 1140 hours free funded childcare until the term after they turn 3 years old. So does the Cabinet Secretary realise that that is a problem, and we do need to fix it if we are going to try and encourage women back into work alongside the childcare policy?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the aspect in general I think we have to look at, Presiding Officer, is ensuring that there is sufficient provision, good quality provision, and in a flexible way that works for what parents need. And that's very important, whether it's for eligible 2s, for younger children, or indeed children who are at school. And I was very pleased to attend an extra time session in Renfrew about the work that's happening with children at school. So the point about that flexibility and the point about ensuring that childcare works for parents, particularly for women, is exceptionally important, both for the women and indeed for the child, Presiding Officer. Eradicating child poverty, as I've said, is this government's top priority, and we know it's inextricably linked with women's poverty. And we have to tackle the inequality that women experience to fulfil our mission. In this financial year, we expect to invest £517 million to deliver 3 benefits to support unpaid carers, the majority of whom are women: Carer Support Payment, which replaces Carers Allowance, and the Carers Allowance Supplement and Young Carers Grant, which are both unique to Scotland. Presiding Officer, this summer we will begin to develop an equality strategy for women and girls in partnership with the Advisory Council. The strategy will identify the gender equality goals that we will prioritise. One of the key messages from the Advisory Council has been that we need to be better at understanding and reflecting women's different needs and experiences in our policies. For example, as has already been discussed by Pam Duncan-Glancy, disabled women, also older women and minority ethnic women. Making sure we hear from a diverse range of women as we develop the strategy will help us to achieve this. The strategy will be co-designed with the Advisory Council and with the Empowering Women panel, who the Minister and I have had the pleasure of meeting and working with this year. These are a diverse group of women and girls of different ages and backgrounds whose lived experience informs and enriches the Council's work. We will publish our equality strategy for women and girls in 2026. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, this afternoon I've highlighted... if I have time?
I'm going to give time back. Yeah, yes. Alex Cole-Hamilton.
grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for giving way, and Liberal Democrats are very supportive of the work her government is outlining today. She mentioned the strategy that's to be forthcoming, and I wonder what she considers the input of enlisting men and indeed boys in the strategy towards the promotion of equality and the protection or the reduction of violence against women and girls, because how we raise our boys and how we enlist men in the fight against this is absolutely vital.
Cabinet Secretary.
The member raises an exceptionally important point, Presiding Officer. As I look round the chamber, as is often the way when we discuss these issues, it is mostly women that are in the chamber. I don't have a problem with that, Presiding Officer, the more the merrier. But the contribution that men make to this debate and the contribution that we as a Parliament need to think about how we bring up our young boys into young men, and the societal norms, particularly that today's younger generations think are acceptable towards women and girls, is a very, very large part of the problem that women and girls continue to face. So he raises a very important point, which I will take away and reflect upon, Presiding Officer, so I thank him for that. Presiding Officer, members this afternoon have highlighted and will highlight areas of concern, areas where they wish the government to go further, and indeed I hope some areas indeed where the government has taken action that they support. It's important that we have this discussion, I think, at this time, as the National Advisory Council of Women and Girls wished us to do, so that we can take our steps forward to that strategy with a shared understanding of the matters that we raise in the chamber today on behalf of our constituents and our stakeholders, and also, I hope, to ensure that we move forward to our next annual statement to once again provide a comprehensive picture of what the government has done and what the government still has to do. So future statements will be informed by the work that will start with our gender strategy and what comes from that. So I'm very proud of the progress that we've made in Scotland, but as I said, there's more to do, and I hope the Chamber will agree with me that gender equality is a goal that we must all continue to strive for. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Just to advise the Chamber, we have got a bit of time in hand, so certainly interventions you will get the time back for. I now call Tess White to speak to and move Amendment 18016.1, around 7 minutes. Ms White.
Presiding Officer, I welcome today's debate. It's so important to shine a light on what women and girls in Scotland are experiencing today. There is a mismatch. The SNP government's aspiration in this area has not been matched by delivery, and wherever you look, from a woman's earnings to her experience of the healthcare system, too often women in Scotland are still getting a raw deal. We're seeing a widening pay gap between men and women. Women are still experiencing poorer health outcomes for a range of issues, while gynecological conditions are frequently misunderstood and misdiagnosed, and still too many women are not believed. Too many women are stuck on waiting lists for breast reconstruction and gynecological services. Women are still more likely to live in poverty. Childcare is often inaccessible and unaffordable for working parents. The number of domestic abuse incidents is rising in Scotland, but the justice system is stacked against traumatised women who can't even find a legal aid solicitor to take their case. The SNP government says it has strengthened the law in relation to violence against women and girls, and yet it keeps playing for time on making non-fatal strangulation a standalone crime. Fiona Drouet is having to take a civil case against the strangulator and abuser of her daughter, he was given community service after her daughter took her own life due to what he did to her. How is that justice? The document we're debating today feels more like a PR exercise from the SNP than a genuine, well-intentioned attempt to grapple with the systemic challenges holding women back. Nor does it grasp the basics, such as protecting the rights and dignity of women and girls. The irony of this SNP government publishing a statement on gender policy coherence is not lost on those women who have been fighting for years to protect their sex-based rights from the SNP's thoroughly incoherent policies on sex and gender. And what timing when human rights charity Sex Matters this week wrote to the SNP government warning of legal action within 14 days if Scottish governments keep failing to comply with the UK Supreme Court's ruling on biological sex. And in the call today to MSPs, again the EHRC made it clear that the law must be followed now. How can John Swinney claim that protecting the rights of women has been one of his top priorities when his government continues to unlawfully deny women and girls their dignity and privacy in changing rooms and toilets? Because that is the reality across Scotland's captured public bodies. The public sector equality duty isn't working. And by repeatedly dragging its feet on implementing the Supreme Court ruling, the SNP government's moral cowardice means that men can still access women's single-sex spaces. Meanwhile, yes.
Rona Mackay.
Thank you for taking the intervention. I'm struggling to understand what path you're going down here. This does not apply to what you're talking about. Is not in the report that we're supposed to be debating today.
Tess White.
Maybe Ms Mackay would like to listen to my speech and then she'll find out. Meanwhile, the SNP's proposed misogyny bill is just the latest in a litany of paused, ditched or botched Sturgeon-era policies. The bill was supposed to improve protections for women against misogynistic abuse. But the SNP shamefully spent so long contesting the definition of woman that they claim the window to legislate has disappeared. Today's document also renews the SNP government's call for the full devolution of equality legislation to enable us to enact progressive and inclusive Scottish values. In other words, now that the law on women's spaces has been clarified, the SNP are demanding the powers to change it and pave the way for self-ID. Presiding Officer, against the background of the Sullivan Review and the Supreme Court ruling, I want to speak briefly about sex and gender, which is highlighted in the Scottish Conservative amendment today. Gender is a nebulous word in policy making, frequently hijacked by activist organisations to promote harmful ideology. Too often it is conflated with sex. And if we want to be serious about sex-based inequalities, we must use the right words to frame the problem and to collect the data to help us solve it. The NHS is a prime example. Gender markers can be changed with the click of a button. You can't manage what you don't properly measure. The voices of gender-critical campaigners must be included in the government policy making moving forwards, rather than the usual government-funded echo chamber. The National Advisory Council on Women and Girls was set up by Nicola Sturgeon, who had maligned women for standing up for the sex-based rights during the GRR bill. Women and girls feel badly let down by this SNP government, and we've had enough. Presiding Officer, people might not want to listen to this, but please, they should show the respect to at least listen to a speech. It's bad manners. We've had enough of tokenistic policy papers, supportive soundbites and the SNP's self-ID obsession. Women want their rights respected, their dignity protected and equality with men. I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you, Ms White. Just for the clarity's sake, it is up to the Chair to determine whether or not noise in the chamber is contravening the courtesy and respect. I would discourage conversations to go on, but members are entitled to respond and react to what they are hearing, as happens in any debate. I now call on Katie Clark, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to open this debate on behalf of Scottish Labour. We, of course, welcome any and all action taken to improve the position of women and girls in society. Whilst we have seen advances towards gender equality in many areas in recent years, some of the threats that women and girls have grown to have to cope with have become more insidious. Today's debate, reflecting on the first annual report from the National Advisory Council for Women and Girls, is an opportunity to take stock of the constraints and challenges that women and girls continue to face. We know that sexism and misogyny, and indeed violence and threats against girls and women's staff in our schools, are not being adequately tackled. And this is an area where we particularly believe there is a need for more focus. We support a cross-campus strategy to address sexism and misogyny in our schools. Our young people are our future, and tackling sexist attitudes and behaviours in our schools is key to creating a more equal Scotland. The Cabinet Secretary, I believe, confirmed the importance of the younger generation in her response to Alex Cole-Hamilton earlier in this debate when she spoke about the importance of the norms in our society. The National Advisory Council on Women and Girls recommendations around accountability call for change in society's attitudes towards sexual violence and domestic abuse, including the evaluation of the cultural landscape around gender power dynamics. But where are we? In 2023-24, Police Scotland recorded over 63,000 incidents of domestic abuse, an increase of 3% from the previous year, reversing the prior downward trends observed since the start of the decade. The overwhelming majority of these incidents involved a female victim and a male suspected perpetrator. The number of recorded sexual crimes has also seen a significant rise over the past decade. Transport Scotland have reported that nearly all women very often or always feel unsafe on public transport, where they feel a risk of harassment, antisocial behaviour and unwanted comments. I've spoken with many women transport workers who have been assaulted or threatened. Indeed, the RMT Women's Committee in Scotland were in this Parliament last week and spoke about some of their personal experience. We've heard multiple times in this chamber of the alarming incidents of abuse and violence, both against female teachers in our schools and against pupils, but also the concerns around many boys' idolisation of sexist social media personalities. Scottish Women Aid and other groups have highlighted that any law that is not designed with misogyny and that is gendered across to ensure safety at their core is limited in how they can be used to respond to the realities of life for women. I am therefore very disappointed that the Government decided to drop the misogyny bill in its latest programme for government, as that would have been an opportunity for legislators to grasp with the seriousness and complexity of this issue. However, let's be clear, misogyny should have been included in the hate crime bill from the outset. We know our justice system is not adequately equipped to protect women from the behaviours of men. In 2021, over 7,000 domestic violence cases were stuck in court backlogs, with almost 70% of cases awaiting trial being sexual offence cases. And we know that the conviction rate for rape remains far lower than other crimes, with survivors often speaking of their experience of the justice system as re-traumatising. Even our police force has admitted to having institutional and persistent problems with sexist bullying. We also know that there's an underreporting of sexual crimes and that victims simply do not have confidence in the justice system. So I would highlight the National Council's calls for trauma-informed forensic medical examination, independent sexual advocacy and privacy for complainants to be embedded across the justice system. And I very much hope that some of the changes that might be brought in with the Victims' Bill enable some of that to happen. But we also need to look more closely about how women can be affected by the multiple disadvantages by factors such as race, sexuality and disability, and therefore I was pleased by what the Cabinet Secretary said in relation to that. Ultimately, if we are to move towards gender equality, that means giving women more. I'm just about to conclude, so I'm not sure if it would be appropriate, but I'm happy to
You can
take
get the
an
time back,
intervention.
certainly. Tess White.
I'd just like to ask Katie Clark if she thinks it appropriate and proportionate for a male who's committed non-fatal strangulation and systemic abuse against his partner to be given community service is appropriate.
Katie Clark.
I wouldn't want to comment on a specific case, and I don't know the specific case. that has been referred to by the member. But what I would say more generally is that we need to ensure that the disposals that the courts give have the confidence of women survivors. And what we know now is that that is often not the case. That doesn't necessarily mean that we need a prison sentence in every case. It does mean that we need adequate disposals that have the confidence of women who are relying on the justice system. So Scottish Labour welcomes much of the work that the Scottish Government is doing. In particular, we welcome the next phase of the Women's Health Plan and the ongoing work that's been taken to improve women's outcomes across all areas of health. I know this was something that the Cabinet Secretary focused on to a great extent in her opening contribution. How we are concerned that progress has been slow and significant inequalities in women's health remain. And I very much hope that those are issues that we'll be able to discuss further in this debate. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Clark. I now call Maggie Chapman. Around 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for this debate this afternoon. As she outlined, gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is one of the Sustainable Development Goals, one that we should all strive to implement. And as Katie Clark has just stated, we must also use whatever mechanisms we have at our disposal to tackle misogyny. I too regret the Scottish Government's decision to drop the planned misogyny legislation. From its inception 8 years ago, the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls has been a wise and prescient, as well as brave and visionary body. Its members, including, of course, the brilliant, compassionate and much-missed Emma Rich, realised that progress would need mechanisms of accountability as well as substantive changes. So one of the Council's recommendations was that Scottish ministers deliver an annual statement on gender policy coherence, followed by a debate in the Scottish Parliament. It may have taken some time to get here, but we have the statement in the form of a report and we have this debate, and I'm grateful for both of these. I think it is commendable that the Government, in its motion for this debate, has not sought to boast about achievements or make excuses about shortcomings, but simply to note the statement and let us talk about it. And with the same dignity and respect, most opposition parties have refrained from submitting amendments to make political points and set the debate on the path of division and conflict. Most, but not all. Once again, our few opportunities to talk about the real and structural barriers to the well-being of women and girls, of families and communities, of generations living and those to come, our tiny slivers of time for conversation and progress are to be dominated by the discourse of transmisogyny. Let's be clear, of the social and economic oppressions, institutional and structural injustices, participatory and intersectional shortfalls experienced by women and girls, absolutely none are inflicted by transgender or non-binary people. On the contrary, the poisonous rhetoric of prosperous so-called gender-critical activism damages all women and girls, trans and cisgendered. But back to the Council and its practical, trans-inclusive, intersectionally aware, robust and transformational feminism. It was created as a catalyst for change. That change isn't always comfortable, and it's certainly not always easy, but I think we recognise today with bitter experience that it's more urgently needed than ever. Gender equality is not a zero-sum game. It isn't about dividing the cake differently, but it's about baking an entirely different kind of cake, one that benefits men, boys and non-binary people, as well as women and girls. It provides radical, sustainable and compassionate alternatives to misogyny, exploitation, injustice and violence. Violence in our homes and schools and streets, in the homes, schools and streets of Gaza and elsewhere, in the bleak destruction of climate change, in the plans and profits of a resurgent war machine. The Council produced 21 recommendations with ongoing, sensitive and meticulous work about how those recommendations can become real. The Scottish Government, to its credit, has accepted them all. If fully implemented, they would transform Scotland for the benefit of everyone, perhaps most of all for those children in poverty on whom our attention continually returns. In my closing speech later, I'll address some of the ways in which we are moving forward towards those goals, that gender policy coherence, and some of the ways in which we can do so much better. But meanwhile, on behalf of the Scottish Greens, I really do welcome this report and the motion, and I wholeheartedly reject the culture war games that I fear we might get into later on this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Alex Cole-Hamilton. Around 4 minutes. Mr Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I am pleased to speak on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats in today's debate, but I am ashamed, I think, that the Cabinet Secretary rightly points out that I'm one of only 4 men in the chamber today. This should matter to all of us, and as I said in my intervention to her, that we will only get meaningful progress here if we enlist men as allies in this crusade and change the way we raise our boys. So I think it's a lesson to all of us. And Liberal Democrats absolutely do welcome this first annual statement on gender policy coherence. It's right. The Scottish Government has responded in the way they have done to the recommendations laid out by the National Advisory Council. Recognition matters, and this statement recognises that gender inequality is structural, it's persistent, and it's entirely unacceptable in modern Scotland. But recognition of that fact alone is just simply not enough. The cultural shift that we seek towards genuine gender equality demands action and delivery from this government, but also from us all as parliamentarians. It demands that women's voices are heard and respected, not just in policy papers, but in this Parliament and in the council chambers across Scotland's 32 local authorities. We're still far behind where we need to be, particularly when it comes to female representation in those local authorities. Presiding Officer, if I may, I'd like to focus in my remarks specifically on health and health inequalities. In 2021, 1 in 5 women aged 16 to 24 reported a mental health condition. And when it comes to physical health, whilst women live longer, that is a statement of fact, than men, they spend less of their lives in good health. We have also seen tangible examples in recent years of how women's health concerns are too often downplayed and treated as an afterthought. I'll never forget, I'm sure colleagues will never forget, the injustice faced by those women who suffered from the devastating effects of transvaginal mesh implants and how they had to fight to be recognised and compensated. If this had been an implant for males, I'm not sure the fight would have had to be so long-lasting or so strong. But there we are. The Women's Health Plan introduced in 2021 was a step forward. It rightly widened the lens beyond reproductive health and included menopausal care, postnatal contraception and conditions like cardiac disease, areas too often overlooked or misunderstood in women. I will give way to Megan Gallagher.
Megan Gallagher.
Grateful for Alex Cole-Hamilton giving way. He's talking about issues in relation to women's health, but what about young women's health? Because we know that young women, particularly from poorer areas, are less likely to take up the PVG vaccine for cervical cancer. So what does Alex Cole-Hamilton think that we can do to encourage that take-up for young women, which is a huge issue right now, but of course it's life-saving as well?
Alex Cole-Hamilton, and give you the time back.
And I'm very grateful to Megan Gallagher for her intervention. I think she makes an excellent point. And I think, it is incumbent on all of us in debates like this to remind young women in particular of those health interventions available to them, which could keep them in better health or even save their lives and protect potentially their unborn children as well. So I'm grateful to her for that. I will come on to younger women if I have time as well. But the appointment of Professor Anna Glazier as Scotland's first woman health champion was absolutely a step forward. But for many, the progress still feels painfully slow, Presiding Officer. Endometriosis is another stark example. Too many women continue to suffer for years before receiving a proper diagnosis or even treatment. That's not equality of healthcare. And, Presiding Officer, if we're serious about gender equality, we must also transform access to work. Today in Scotland, women are more likely to be in insecure work, stuck in low-paid, stereotypically female sectors, and less likely to reach senior roles, even with the same qualifications as their male peers, even with the policies we've tried to enact in this chamber. It's still a fact. That must change. The 1,140 hours of free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds is key to that, as we know the bulk of childcare still falls on women, despite how we would wish to change our societal norms. But across much of Scotland, local authorities are cutting back on this provision by providing free hours from the term rather than the day after the child's first birthday. This means many families are missing out on up to 4 months of this free provision, and again, women bear the brunt. The government needs to ensure that local authorities are provided with the funding they need to roll out the support across, with equality across the country to avoid this postcode lottery. The last thing that mothers trying to return to work need is this unfair roadblock. My party want to go further by extending funded entitlements so that more two-year-olds get the benefit, with a view to extending the provision to one-year-olds as well. But all of these policies must be backed with workforce support, proper pay and reliable delivery, or they risk becoming empty promises. This brings me to the unpaid workforce that keeps our society going. In 23 and 24, 73% of unpaid carers were women. 1 in 4 economically inactive women cited looking after family and home as the reason that they were economically inactive. And that's nearly 4 times the rate of men. 4 times. Liberal Democrats have consistently championed carers' rights, and we have led calls to make the carers' allowance system fairer and more flexible. We won an increase in the earnings threshold for carers' allowance, allowing unpaid carers to earn more from part-time work without losing vital support through benefits. Presiding Officer, I will close by saying this. I welcome the ambition and focus of this annual statement, but action and delivery are what counts. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to the open debate. I call first Rona Mackay, to be followed by Sharon Dowie. Around 4 minutes. Ms Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to be speaking in this important debate to highlight the key findings in the annual National Advisory Council on Women and Girls report on gender equality coherence. This report is vital to track the progress of gender equality in public and private life. It's packed full of interesting, sometimes surprising statistics, and too many to highlight during a short speech, but I will try and sift out some of them. Firstly, the SNP has a proud record of fighting for gender equality while in government and will leave no stone unturned in its work towards equality. From action on equal pay, support for women returning to the workplace, the first gender-balanced cabinet in the UK, and taking action to end period poverty, we've worked hard to tear down barriers. But make no mistake, despite record investment on challenging inequality and norms, there is still a great deal of work to be done, not least in keeping women and girls safe. As convener of the cross-party group on men's violence against women and girls, we constantly challenge the underpinning issue that affects the safety of women and girls in society, which is, of course, the behaviour of men. And domestic violence is still a scourge in our society. Our Equally Safe strategy strives to combat all forms of violence against women and girls, including delivering the Women's Health Plan we've been hearing about, investing to tackle domestic violence against women and girls and survivors of abuse, and supporting women to access fair work and helping to reduce the gender pay cap. We are also supporting schools to equip young people with the skills to counter the impacts of online hate, including misogyny, and we're piloting specialist independent legal advice for complainers in rape and attempted rape cases. Presiding Officer, a helpful briefing from Engender states that while there has been some movement towards embedding intersectional gender budgeting, the pace of progress remains unacceptably slow. So, in short, we must do better. Another overriding issue is the lack of essential data to improve the collection, analysis and use of data and evidence on gender inequality. So I'm pleased that the Scottish Government is continuing to work with our stakeholders on this very important issue. As a member of the Criminal Justice Committee, I'm also pleased that we're currently legislating to introduce domestic homicide and suicide reviews, abolishing the not proven verdict and establishing a sexual offences court and a Victims and Witnesses Commissioner to improve women's journey through the justice system. Presiding Officer, we know that women's poverty and child poverty are intrinsically linked, that women experience barriers in the labour market, including discriminatory practices and the gender pay cap. That is critical to address if we're to improve the lives of women. To that end, we're investing £522 million in 2025 to 26 to deliver 3 benefits to support unpaid carers. And in the 2023-24 census, 73% of carers were women, so that is absolutely crucial. And we've been talking about our childcare policy of investing around £1 billion in high-quality funded early learning and childcare every year since 2021. And that also helps combat poverty, and I would like to see it go further too. And the child benefit and the scrapping of the 2-child cap, all these things are so important and not available in the rest of the UK. On health, we published the Women's Health Plan and appointed Scotland's first Women's Health Champion, as well as investing over £17 million to support a sexual assault coordination service in every health board. And I just want to say I agree with Pam Duncan-Glancy's earlier intervention on intersectionality and access to facilities in general practice. It's something that needs to be addressed. As a member of the Gender Sensitive Audit Advisory Panel, I'm pleased that we continue to strive to elect more women, and I'm confident in our commitment to improve women's representation at every level of public and private life. So, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, this report shines a light on not just what we've achieved, but what we have yet to achieve to progress the equality in the lives of women and girls now and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McCoy. I now call Sharon Dowie to be followed by Claire Hockey. Around 4 minutes, Ms Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to debate an issue that is very close to me and to many of my fellow female MSPs across this chamber. Equality between men and women, boys and girls should be one of the driving objectives of this Parliament. We need equality in schools, in the workplace, in healthcare and in the economy. Failure to deliver this doesn't just fail Scotland's females, who account for more than half the population. It also results in a number of missed opportunities for growth, progress and innovation. And while I welcome this debate, it should also be noted that women across Scotland are becoming fed up with so much talk being matched with such little action. Females may well appreciate MSPs taking the time to debate in the chamber or to set up focus groups or roundtable discussions, but we are also aware that while the talking continues, things on the ground move backwards. The National Advisory Council on Women and Girls made a number of recommendations designed to reduce gender inequality. And ministers recognised that tackling such inequality was key to a fairer Scotland and that women are, and I quote, central to all government priorities. Yet in real life, many measures are only getting worse. Perhaps the most brutal measure of all is the rate of domestic violence in Scotland. Cases are rising, and police now receive a report of domestic abuse in Scotland pretty much every 10 minutes. Women may not be the victim in every one of these cases, but we know for sure that they are the victim in the overwhelming majority, and that the attacker is almost always a man, and always a partner or a former partner. That is patently unfair, that someone, just because of their sex at birth, is then on a pathway which makes them considerably more likely to be a victim of violence, abuse, intimidation, bullying or coercion. Domestic violence is rife in this country, and until we turn the tide on it, we can never truly claim things are even close to being equal. Even seeking justice is often out of the reach for too many women. One survivor living in the Highlands contacted 116 solicitors listed on the Scottish Legal Aid Board website and still couldn't find help with divorce proceedings. This is not an isolated incident. Gender inequality can be seen throughout the generations. Despite performing better in school, learning faster and behaving better, a girl is less likely to go on to have a well-paying, successful career than a male contemporary. In 2024, our gender pay gap widened. There are many reasons for this, but we can't blame it all on childcare and the fact that women are more likely to be carers, both of their children and their elderly relatives. Attitudes need to change in the classroom and in the boardroom. We need more flexibility and more incentives and support for women who want to push up their career ladder in the very same way as men. Despite living longer, women also experience poorer outcomes for a range of health issues, and conditions that are unique to women, such as endometriosis and cervical cancer, are not well understood, treated or tested for. We also have the issue of gender recognition. Despite the Supreme Court ruling and a clear update from the EHRC, the Scottish Government's failure to implement this is, at the very best, a stalling tactic. And I wonder if the Minister can tell us in her closing remarks why public bodies are not complying with the law now.
Yes, Alex Scott-Hamilton.
Listening to Sharon, I'm grateful to her for giving way. But Sharon Dowie says that the EHRC has given clear guidance following the Supreme Court judgment. But she must not have seen the Select Committee's evidence hearing with Kishore Faulkner as the Human Rights Commissioner, at which anything else was true. It was certainly not clear. And frankly, the remarks of Lord Sumption and Lady Hale have said that actually the possibility of misinterpreting the judgment by EHRC is very clear and redolent. What does she have to say to those eminent former Supreme Court justices?
Sharon Dowie, I can give you the time back.
Thank you. I think the EHRC ruling was quite clear, and I don't think that there is any way that we need to wait just now for guidance coming out. And I would like to know why the public bodies are not implementing it just now. If we're standing in here just now talking about a report from the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls, I think a good starting point is that we actually know what a woman is. So, to continue, we still have men in women's prisons. And there's still a vacuum in guidance when it comes to how public servants like police officers should deal with men, many of whom are twisted and dangerous, who are pretending to be women. Presiding Officer, we have talked a lot today about the importance of equality and how vital it is that women and girls are supported, looked after and protected. I hope the next time we come to this chamber to discuss this topic, we have more positive evidence from the ground about the impact all this debate is making. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Claire Hawkey to be followed by Paul O'Kane. Around 4 minutes, Ms Hawkey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I'd like to begin by welcoming the publication of the Government's first annual statement on gender policy coherence, which was, of course, a recommendation from the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls. And I'd also like to commend the members of the Council and the members of the Empowering Women panel for sharing their expertise and vision to get us to this point. Some of the most difficult challenges which have impacted us all in recent years, from the cost of living crisis to the pandemic, have had a disproportionate impact on certain groups in our communities, including women. Women's poverty and child poverty are intrinsically linked, and women are more likely to use and work for public services. So getting our policies right for women and for the most disadvantaged women means better outcomes for everyone. The SNP has a proud record of fighting for gender equality while in government, from action on equal pay, support for women returning to the workplace, taking action on period poverty and introducing Equally Safe, the strategy to combat all forms of violence against women and girls. Policies like the universal provision of 1,140 hours of high-quality early learning and childcare are critical to supporting women into work and staying in work and keeping families out of poverty. Presiding Officer, I particularly welcome the Scottish Government's commitment around intersectional gender budgeting to help us improve how we think about how spending and revenue raising impacts men and women differently, and if we can use our budget processes to reduce gender inequality. Recently, I was shocked when South Lanarkshire Council, the area where my Rutherglen constituency is based, first published an impact assessment on proposed changes to school transport, and did not consider the differential impact that any change would have on women. It became abundantly clear when families began to share their stories and their concerns that women will be disproportionately adversely affected by the cuts that are unfortunately coming into force in August. For example, many women in my constituency told me about their concerns about how changes to transport arrangements for their children are going to affect their ability to work, or to fit their work around their caring responsibilities. This will, of course, have potentially far-reaching consequences for all of the family. The local councillors that noticed the omission of gender in the impact assessments and pressed officers for it to be included should be commended, but it should not have happened, Presiding Officer. It underlines the necessity and urgency of placing equality at the centre of our policies and decision-making, and ensuring that it is taken into account in all actions in all spheres of government. Presiding Officer, gender equality is an unwon case, both in Scotland and around the world. And this statement doesn't minimise the positive changes and the progress that we've made as a Parliament and as a society, but it's a reminder that we cannot be complacent. I think it's really important to acknowledge the First Minister's comments in the introduction to the report that we're discussing today. This can feel like a very precarious time for equalities, and that there are political headwinds that are trying to undermine hard-won progress that has been made. Presiding Officer, we must keep up the momentum, and in that context, I'm pleased that the Scottish Government recognises that there is more work to do to improve the collection, analysis and use of evidence on gender equality, and is committed to doing so, and is developing an equality strategy for women and girls. This strategy will be shaped by the voices of women and girls in a tangible way, and will provide a vehicle to accelerate the pace of progress and will enable greater accountability. Women in Scotland have faced inequality for generations, and it can feel that the change in societal, cultural and institutional structures that maintain that inequality is slow. However, the work that is highlighted in this statement will move us closer to this change that we all want to see, and I welcome its publication.
Thank you very much. I now call Paul O'Kane to be followed by Karen Adam. Around 4 minutes, Mr O'Kane.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to be able to speak in this debate today. And I, of course, like colleagues from across the Chamber, welcome the publication of this annual statement, which finally delivers on the recommendation of 2 Scottish ministers to deliver an annual statement on gender policy coherence. And that was, of course, as we've heard already, first suggested by the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls back in 2019. And of course, it has taken from then to ensure that this report is brought to fruition. And I appreciate, of course, we have had challenges in that intervening period, not least COVID. But I do think that we should reflect sometimes on the amount of time it takes in order to prepare a report and to then see how we're going to implement the actions. And I think that's already been reflected across the Chamber today about reports being well and good, but action being really important. I think, though, whatever the challenges have been in terms of actually collating the information needed to deliver such an annual statement and the internal processes, I do think there's an opportunity now for us all to take cognizance of this report and to reflect upon it and to decide how we will move forward, both in terms of the government's actions, but also in terms of the actions that Parliament can take in terms of scrutiny. So I do think today's debate is important, and I think that on an ongoing basis and on an annual basis it will be an important opportunity for Parliament to come together and to reflect on what progress is being made, or indeed what progress is not being made. And of course, we do have similar opportunities within the parliamentary calendar to reflect and to debate on issues that are relevant in terms of supporting women and girls within Scottish society. And I reflect that many of the important opportunities, such as the annual 16 days of activism on gender-based violence, obviously we have a debate each year at that point, but I've reflected, and I think colleagues have also reflected in that debate, that it can't just be about one moment in time or 16 days in that case, or indeed today. It's about our year-round scrutiny and interrogation, I think, of these issues and making sure that we don't lose them and we don't miss them in terms of the day-to-day work that's done in this Parliament. And I think that's particularly crucial, and we've heard this point made already, for the men in this chamber and for the male colleagues in Parliament, because there are, as always, too few men in these debates, and it is very important, I think, that we all reflect on our actions and on our behaviours, and I always do try to say that in terms of these debates. But we also must reflect on how we are bringing up a new generation of boys and young men and what their attitudes and understanding is, but also how are we giving them the right support to be the best men that they can be, and to respect and to understand what is acceptable in terms of their behaviours towards women and girls. And we've heard many of those issues, I think, explored already very eloquently in speeches today. Because I do think that we need to take robust action to push back on toxic influences, toxic figures online, the drip feeding of outdated and harmful views towards women, which has arguably set back our debates quite some way. And we have to push harder to look at potential new ways to target these narratives, particularly in online spaces. And I would pay tribute to everyone, and particularly the women in this chamber, who continue to work collaboratively to do that, and indeed to raise these issues and ensure that they don't disappear from our discourse. I would just like to, perhaps in my closing, reflect on the work that's been done in committees in this Parliament, because I think that's very important. It's where a lot of good, high-quality work can be done, not least the Equality, Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee. There are colleagues from that committee in the Chamber today, but also in the Social Justice and Social Security Committee, which is coming to the conclusion of its report on women leaving a domestically abusive relationship, particularly in terms of their finances. That report will be forthcoming, and I think will be very important, because the evidence that we heard in that committee inquiry was very stark indeed and very concerning, and there are a lot of tangible actions that could make a real difference in terms of how we support women to leave a financially abusive relationship, to get the right support and to fundamentally get the right footing and the right financial support to be able to move on with their lives. So there is a huge amount of work. There's work for all of us to do, but particularly I'm cognizant today of the role that men play in terms of understanding and moving forward and supporting the women in this chamber and beyond in Scotland, so that we can all move forward together for equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr O'Kane. I now call Karen Adam to be followed by Ben McPherson. Around 4 minutes, Ms Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I'm actually proud to speak in support of the Scottish Government motion and to welcome this publication of the first annual statement on gender policy coherence. This is a long overdue step that starts holding us accountable to the promises that we've made to women and girls in Scotland. The National Advisory Council on Women and Girls has given us clear direction, and their recommendations are rooted in real-world experience. Improve our public sector equality duty, gather better intersectional data, tackle workplace inequality, shift public attitudes, and critically embed intersectional gender budgeting into how we do government. And that is what I'm going to focus my remarks on today, is gender budgeting, because how we spend money is how we show our priorities. Because let's be honest, in Scotland, like many other countries, we've benefited off the backs of women's unpaid care for generations, and it's women who have mostly raised the kids, cared for elderly parents, supported disabled family members, run the school fundraisers, managed the house and kept things afloat in a crisis. And what have they mostly got in return? Pension gaps, poverty, burnout and oftentimes stigma, especially if they're doing it alone. The irony. Instead of valuing unpaid care as the essential work that it is, we've treated it often like it's a personal lifestyle choice, something to be quietly admired, maybe, but not something to properly fund or support. And in far too many cases, it's even been used against women as a reason to say that they didn't work hard enough, didn't contribute enough, and didn't earn enough to deserve financial security in later life. And that really has to change. And the way we change it is by building that recognition directly into our systems. And that's what gender budgeting is all about. And that's why the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls is right to keep pushing for it. And I want to thank the Scottish Women's Budget Group for their briefing and their brilliant long-standing work on this. They've shown us clearly how budgets aren't neutral, they're political. And if we don't apply a gender lens, we end up with the same old story of services designed for a world that doesn't exist, where women are expected to pick up the slack. Now, we need to turn that on its head. Women still carry the weight of unpaid care and underpaid care in this country. They take time out of work to raise children, and they often reduce hours to support relatives. And they often retire with not enough contributions for a full pension, and yet they're the ones holding families, communities and even whole sectors like health and social care together. And while they're doing all that, they're still made to feel like they should be doing more, or doing it with less, or doing it more quietly. We should not be interested in quiet gratitude. I'm interested in structural change. I want a Scotland that builds fairness into its foundations, and that starts with how we raise and spend our money. The Scottish Government has made great progress. Free childcare, the Scottish Child Payment and many more initiatives like Carers Allowance Supplement, and, of course, lifting the 2-child cap. They are great examples of what happens when we centre fairness and compassion in our budgets. And these policies are lifting families out of poverty and recognising the value of care. Gender budgeting shouldn't be optional, it should be law. We shouldn't still be seeing local authorities pass budgets with no proper equality impact assessments, and we can't keep saying we care about fairness while still making decisions that disadvantage the very people doing the caring. This isn't just a women's issue, it's about children, disabled people, low-income families and future generations. When we budget for women, we're budgeting for a fairer, more equal Scotland for everyone. Presiding Officer, women have done the heavy lifting for far too long. It's time we lifted the burden from them and shared the power. And I look forward to seeing the progress made next year when we gather to debate this again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Adam. We now come to the final speaker in the open debate, Ben Macpherson. Again, around 4 minutes. Mr Macpherson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I am grateful also for this opportunity to speak in this important debate on progressing the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls recommendations on equality. Of course, the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls was formed as a catalyst for change, addressing gender inequality and providing independent strategic advice to the First Minister and the wider Scottish Government. Remembering when it was formed in 2017, it has made a series of recommendations since then to tackle gender inequality across Scotland, and there has been particular focus on creating the leadership, culture and systems required to enable women and girls to be better prioritised and responded to in the right ways. Much has been said in this debate already about the progress in multiple areas, whether that's in social security and pay, in reducing inequality, whether that's financially or in terms of opportunity. And I absolutely celebrate all of that and welcome the statements from the Government on progress it wants to continue to make and that Parliament wants to see made. Hard-won progress has been achieved, and we are rightly today recognising that, as well as reflecting on what more needs to be done. One of the priorities, of course, of the Advisory Council and of their recommendations is about attitudinal shifts. And other speakers have talked about this already, and I will focus the remainder of my remarks in that space. The Scottish Government is absolutely exercising leadership to challenge the underpinning issues that affect the safety of women and girls in our society, which, as has been emphasised already, the behaviour of men and boys. We have made much progress, but there is more to do. That is absolutely sure. Let me be clear, most men and most boys would be speaking as passionately as I was if they had this opportunity. If they had this opportunity about the need for greater equality and in support of women and girls. But of course, there are still social attitudes, behaviours that are counterproductive, negative, causing great harm when it comes to women and girls in our society. And we must continue to challenge that behaviour of men and boys, and to do so proactively and passionately and strategically. We have made real progress, but we are also at a very fragile time, I think, particularly when it comes to boys. The influences around them in modern Scotland are sometimes trying to lead them to regress ourselves as a society. The influences online, some particular influencers are well known, can be very harmful and are very worrying. And all of this feeds into this greater challenge that we have with a number of younger people in our society who, they will have situations around them that have potentially made their lives very challenging, but are engaging in some really challenging behaviour, whether that's violence, whether that's theft. And the Youth Summit update that we got earlier today in Parliament was really helpful. It's all connected. The violence in schools issue, it's all connected. And actually, I'm really glad and supportive of seeing the elevated steps that we have seen from central government, as we would expect, to really try and deal with this issue of this very small minority, but growing minority of young men engaging in extremely challenging behaviour and extremely worrying behaviour, including in my constituency, because their potential impact on other young men around them, including spreading harmful messages and attitudes towards women and girls has the potential to have a really damaging effect, not just in the short to medium term in our communities, but beyond that into the years and decades ahead. So an urgent and strong response on how we support men and boys to make better choices and deal with those who are making bad choices is really important. Because we don't want to go backwards. We've got enough work to do as things are, so let's continue to make progress and think together how between this period and the 16 days of activism in November, what more can we do as MSPs in our communities with other stakeholders in our country to challenge bad attitudes of some, a minority, of men and boys and change those social attitudes in our communities and in our society. It's good to be working with colleagues on this. I'm very proud to support the Advisory Council in their work and the Government in progressing that. And I hope, as we come back from the recess, that we can think about what more we can do and look forward to supporting the Government in its endeavours.
Thank you. We now move to closing speeches. I call Maggie Chapman. Around 4 minutes. Ms Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to close this debate on behalf of the Scottish Greens. We've heard many thoughtful reflections from members about aspects of the Council's work, of their recommendations, of achievements and, of course, of regrettable gaps and shortfalls. Shirley-Anne Somerville, in her foreword to the report, acknowledged that the pace of change can feel frustratingly slow, and I think many members share that frustration. While it is, of course, important to move forward with care and consultation, sometimes the sense of urgency seems to be lost in successive changes or stages that never quite reach their objective. The first example in the report of the What Works Institute, I think, illustrates that tendency. We recognise the limits imposed by the devolution settlement, in yet more examples of why we need the full powers of a normal country. But in the meantime, there has been important and imaginative work done. For example, although we are barred from legislating for quotas, funding of Elect Her and the Engender Equal Representation Project, alongside support for COSLA, has opened up the potential for political representation by and for many more women and non-binary people in Scotland. Like Rona Mackay, I'm glad to be part of the Gender Sensitive Parliament Advisory Group, looking for further opportunities to improve the diversity of representation we have in our politics. Gaps, of course, remain, some of them wide and gaping. The difference between the funded childcare currently offered to families and that which was recommended by the Council is immense. If women could access the levels of funded childcare recommended, 50 hours a week for children from 6 months of age, their opportunities for earning, career progression and family well-being would be utterly transformed. The impacts of this on our poverty levels cannot be understated. We've heard too of the devastating impacts on the lives not only of women but of their families and wider communities, of unequal or absent access to and misogyny in our healthcare, justice, education and other public service systems on which we should all be able to rely. What has been heartening to hear, though, is the clear majority call for the recognition that gender policy coherence will not work without intersectionality. We must be better at understanding the multiple, overlapping and interconnected identities and factors that affect whether or not women and girls are able to survive and thrive. The First Minister, in his foreword to the report, wrote of political headwinds that threaten our progress on gender equality. He's absolutely right, as Claire Hockey highlighted too. We are in a very different context to that in which Nicola Sturgeon founded this initiative. But that's no reason to give up, to lose hope, or to diminish the scale or the radicalism of our ambition. We face wars and preparation for more war, brutal cuts to the livelihoods of the poorest, priority given to economic growth at all costs, with no care for distribution, the rhetoric and reality of punitive immigration controls, the normalisation of killing thousands of children by swift or slow violence, the myth that climate change is controllable through technology alone, and the replacement of male accountability with misogyny and transphobia. But we know how to counter all of these, how to live and speak and act with integrity, intelligence, solidarity and compassion. Scotland has been a leader in human rights, and we can be again. It is still bitterly disappointing that we don't have in this session the groundbreaking legislation we were promised. But we in the Scottish Greens, at least, will not rest until it is achieved. The groundwork, thanks to people like Emma Rich, has been done. It will be tragic if we do not continue with renewed energies to build upon it. Women and girls of Scotland need us to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Chapman. I now call Pam Duncan-Glancy, around 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As members have highlighted today, there are still too many barriers for women and girls in society. It is therefore important to celebrate when progress is made. And progress is not inevitable. It takes bravery, and it requires you to persuade people who disagree with you and to take them with you. This is the definition of leadership, and we've seen progress, much of which has been outlined by members today. Further progress I'd like to comment on, of course, is that this week the UK Labour Government made progress by righting a long-standing wrong experienced by women by decriminalising abortion and enabling women to have control over their own bodies. The UK Labour Government's Employment Rights Bill also adds protections that will support women in the workplace, expanding the preventative duty on employers to take all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment and increasing the burden of justification on employers to accept flexible working requests. The UK Labour Government has also committed to making parental and paternal leave a day one right. But whilst we celebrate success, we must also accept that there is still much to do, as many members, including Maggie Chapman, Ben Macpherson, Sharon Dowie and Claire Haughey, have acknowledged this afternoon. Gender inequality harms everyone, not just women and girls, and ending it should be a national priority. Addressing the remaining gaps in gender inequality will take more than strategies and publications. It will require reform of public services and actions to shift systemic inequalities, as my colleague Paul O'Kane pointed out. And it's important to consider the particular impacts on women and girls who face additional challenges due to the barriers society places in front of them, as other members have noted today, because of how their gender interacts with their race, religion, sexuality, disability, or a combination of all. Presiding Officer, on various measures, there is a lot of work yet to do. Women, as Tess White noted, still earn less than men. On public transport, which the report notes women rely on more than men, slow pace on regulation of buses has negative impacts on women because it allows decisions, for example, like the one this week by First Bus, to cut the number 65 in Glasgow that will disproportionately, of course, affect women. Or the fact that concerns of taxi drivers in Glasgow have not been addressed, meaning hundreds are leaving the job, leaving women with less access to a safe route home. The plan also mentions women's health, but it is still the case, as has been acknowledged, that women experience health inequality, including disabled women in Glasgow who have difficulties accessing smear tests with, in some cases, deadly consequences. And I thank members, including the Cabinet Secretary and Rona Mackay, for acknowledging that this is unacceptable. It notes too that women are more likely to be in temporary accommodation and need social housing. And Women's Aid told me this week, Glasgow Women's Aid told me this week, that the average time a woman leaving abuse spent in temporary accommodation was, in 2009, about 90 days. Now, some women are there for over 2 years, and fears of ending up in temporary accommodation, leaving the home they're currently in with the perpetrator of violence, is preventing women in Glasgow from leaving abusive partners. And so we must address this if we are to address women's inequality. And despite the fact there is Gender Equality Task Force in education, girls are still less likely to study STEM subjects than boys. Women in teaching and support staff report a rise in misogynistic behaviour, and violence in school, as my colleague Katie Clark highlighted, exists. One newly qualified primary teacher detailed this week how she has bruises up and down her arms. And this week's guidance, I think, whilst useful in terms of consequences, some of it, it doesn't really tackle the root causes of the violence that many women and girls are experiencing in schools. There are real-life consequences for all policy decisions that are taken, and on key public services. Task force and strategies are important aspects of that, but we also need to take a different approach in public services to really shift the dial on women's equality. And we in this place, I think, have a responsibility across parties to rise to this challenge. And for that, I'm grateful to the tone, most of the tone of the debate this afternoon, and the collegiate approach at which we've come to address this. Because we have a responsibility, I think, to make politics a better place for women, so that they can join in the solutions in this place. And so, Presiding Officer, let me close on one issue of rising abuse in public life. And it is the case that women MSPs face misogynistic abuse more now in their public role than they did when Parliament first opened. Councillors and MPs are also affected, and so are women seeking office. And one of my male colleagues has remarked that their eyes were opened to levels of women abuse that women face on social media when I had tagged them in the post. And I know staff in my team would rather I didn't have access to my accounts at all to save me seeing some of the vile, ableist, misogynist comments. And every woman in this place and in public life will be able to recognise that. And none of us should have to experience that. And this chamber must reflect society. But if it is to do that, we have to make politics a better, safer, more comfortable place for women to be. So whilst the government, of course, must go further, as we would all say, and show practical political leadership, we also have to tackle head-on many issues women and girls face every day, and resolve to ensure that by our collective endeavours in this place and beyond, Scotland can become the welcoming and inclusive country we all want and know it can be. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Duncan Glancy. I now call Megan Gallagher a generous 6 minutes. Ms Duncan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and certainly in a point of consensus with Pam Duncan Glancy, I'm sure my team also wish that I did not have access to my social media accounts, because I see the abuse that I receive on a daily basis, but I've also seen the abuse that many of our female MSPs see on a daily basis. But I think actually what we probably need to start doing is collectively calling it out, and I think that would maybe make the Parliament a far better place than what it is just now. But on that point, I do want to welcome the publication from the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls, the first annual statement on gender policy coherence. We've heard a lot this afternoon from various members who have spoken in the debate on healthcare, justice, childcare, equality, strategy, and I do want to dip into each of these topics, if I may, in the time that I have this afternoon. If I could start with healthcare, because there are a lot of areas of consensus, particularly in relation to plans surrounding endometriosis and menopause. I think any woman who has any concerns regarding these issues should be able to be seen and seen straight away. And it is so important that women have access to that health care as soon as they possibly can. I think Pam Duncan Glancy raised a very important issue in relation to smear tests for disabled women. I think that's something that too many of us take for granted, actually, is being able to go for a smear test, as awkward as it is, but actually multiply that with how a disabled woman might feel having to check with a GP to see if they actually have the accessibility for them to come in and get their smear. On top of that worry, that stress that naturally comes with getting a smear test, that we've all probably felt at some point in our life. So I think that's something that, if it can be addressed through the Scottish Government, through conversations with GPs, I think that would be a right way forward for more women who have disabilities accessing smear tests whenever they need or whenever they are called to receive one. The exchange that I had with Alex Cole-Hamilton on cervical cancer, I do believe that this is an issue that needs to be picked up by the Scottish Government. Children from the poorest areas are less likely to get an anti-cancer jab. Public Health Scotland has warned about the uptake in Scotland's poorest or deprived communities, that is 20% lower than what it is in more affluent areas. So that's something that I do feel that the government needs to move on to in terms of the Women's Health Plan, to make sure that, yes, we are addressing concerns for older women, but also younger women as well, and get them on the right pathway and make sure that they are vaccinated. And I think earlier on I said PVG instead of HPV vaccine, so I do apologise for that. Yes, I will, Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to agree with Megan Gallagher about this really important issue that she raised in her remarks. I hope I can give her reassurance that the work has been undertaken to both identify the barriers and then to deal with those. So we do have the Screening Inequalities Fund that's there to look at these issues, but also the work that's been taken by the Cervical Cancer Elimination Group to look at, again, exactly what the challenges are, why they are happening, because the opportunity, if we get this right, is immense. Both for women and the public purse. But we need to make sure we tackle those barriers. So I thank her for raising that today.
No, I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that intervention, and of course, anything that can be done to try and increase that uptake is more than welcome, and I'm sure would receive cross-party support, because it is about protecting young women and girls from being diagnosed with cervical cancer later in life. No one wants that. Of course, we heard from Alice Cole-Hamilton as well in relation to transvaginal mesh issues, one that's been raised many a time in this Parliament, and I know there's so many MSPs in this chamber who feel so passionately about this issue and have really driven it forward in order to get results. But again, we've got to keep driving. We can't stop now, because we need to make sure that anyone who has been impacted by this, still receives the support that they deserve because of what's happened to them. If I move on to childcare related issues, this is something that of course, yes, I will, Paul O'Kane, yes.
Paul O'Kane.
I'm very grateful to Megan Gallagher for taking the intervention. Before she moves on, because I know she's about to move on to talk about childcare, does she recognise as well the importance of neonatal services for women, and in particular the issues that we have debated around the neonatal service at Wishaw University Hospital and the downgrade by this government of those services, which is of a serious concern to a number of Lanarkshire members in this chamber, not least my colleague Davy Russell in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, and I wonder if she might recognise the importance of that to women in this debate.
Megan Gallagher.
Well, of course, I brought a members' business debate on this exact issue. Wishaw is in my region, and it is something that I care passionately about. I think women should have access to neonatal services as close to home as possible. And for me, I will always stand up for Lanarkshire mums who want to go to Wishaw to receive that service if they and their babies need it. If I can move on to childcare, Presiding Officer, I've already went off on a tangent. This is my usual. Childcare was raised by, again, a number of MSPs. We do have 30 hours of free-funded childcare. The Cabinet Secretary did say that that was the most generous in the United Kingdom, but of course the Scottish Government also promised to roll this out from children who are 9 months and older, yet we've not seen any progress in that space. So I think it would be incumbent for the Government to actually update Parliament whether or not that is still their ambition, or if that is no longer their ambition to have free-funded childcare from 9 months and onwards. Because again, if we are talking about getting our economy moving, if we're talking about getting women who want to go back into work, then that is something, of course, that would be widely welcomed and I'm sure supported by parties across this chamber. There were justice issues being raised throughout this debate as well. I'm not going to have the time to go through all of them, so I will move on to the equality strategy, because I think this is where members raised a lot of issues this afternoon. We've got issues in relation to widening pay gaps. We have the misogyny bill that has been dropped. I think, again, that was yet another promise brought forward by the Scottish Government that has not been maintained throughout the duration of this parliamentary term, and there will be people who will feel desperately let down that this misogyny bill is not coming forward to the Scottish Parliament this term. I think Sharon Dowie was right when she said that there's a lot of talk surrounding equality issues, but not so much in terms of action, and that's where improvements need to be made. And of course, we had Paul O'Kane and Ben McPherson and others talk about the attitudes of boys and young men and how we can better improve outcomes for women by tackling issues such as violence against women and girls. But if I may finish on a point raised by Tess White in relation to sex and gender, because it is important, because we are talking about women and girls in this debate, and we are talking about sex-based rights. And it relates to the Supreme Court ruling on single-sex bases, because last night the Scottish Government did issue a response that said the following: the Scottish Government has been clear that we have accepted the Supreme Court judgment. We are reviewing policies, guidance and legislation potentially impacted by the judgment. And then they go on to say the Scottish Government's approach is aligned with that of the UK Government and Welsh Government. And they are awaiting the EHRC's revised strategy code of practice. But this is a rather peculiar statement, I've got to say, because in a meeting this morning that has been mentioned by my colleague Tess White, the EHRC were crystal clear. They can get on with it and they should comply with the law now. So I think what we need to find out today is why the Government are in my view, unnecessarily delaying the implementation of the Supreme Court ruling. I'm not entirely sure if I've got time. I've got time.
There's a little
yes, I will.
ahead.
Thank you.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm very grateful to Megan Gallagher for giving way. And here we have, again, an example of the Conservatives saying that the EHRC guidance is crystal clear, whereas the testimony given by Kishore Faulkner to the Select Committee last week, anyone watching that would be seeing that it is anything but clear. And that is because at the end of the day, her commissioner suggesting that all public toilets owned by public bodies should be assigned on gender at birth. Yet the policing of that, she's also suggested, would require people to ask for birth certificates on presentation at those toilets, making this absolutely absurd. Does Megan Gallagher realise that there is still a live debate on this topic and that we shouldn't implement it until that debate is concluded?
Megan Gallagher.
I'm not entirely sure that Alex Cole-Hamilton was listening to what I said. The call was this morning, and that came directly from the EHRC. MSPs were present on the call. They were listening to what they said, and the EHRC were clear that public bodies can get on with implementing the Supreme Court ruling. So what I'm asking is, why not? Why the delay? Why are we not getting on with this point now? No, I think I've been really generous with interventions during my contribution today. But I do recommend that Alex Cole-Hamilton meets with the EHRC because it might be clearer. It might be made clearer for him on that point. No, I think I'll get on with what I'm going to say because I'm well over time and I've taken a lot of interventions on this issue. So with that, Presiding Officer, I'm going to leave my remarks there. I do think it's important for the Government to clarify why we're still stalling. I think it is clear that we can get on with matters now. And with that, I will close my remarks, Presiding Officer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Gallagher. And I now call on the Minister to wind up the debate.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and members across the Chamber for their contributions. I would also like to add my thanks to members of the Advisory Council on Women and Girls, past and present, who have made today's debate possible, and to Empowering Women panel as well. As the Cabinet Secretary said, the panel is a diverse group of women and girls who I had the opportunity to meet earlier this year. They have been brought together by the Council so that their lived experience can inform its work. This is important because some women experience multiple forms of discrimination and inequality because they are disabled or they are from a minority ethnic background, for example. Some of the Advisory Council's recommendations are aimed at ensuring that the voices of the most marginalised women and girls are shaping our policies across government. The Council has asked us to put lived experience at the heart of policy making and to ensure that we are collecting robust intersectional data. So over the next few minutes, I'd like to tell you how we are delivering on those asks, and I will try to respond to as many of the points that were raised across the Chamber as I possibly can. At the end of April, the Scottish Government published new equality outcomes for the period to 2029. We are required to set these. I'm going to make some progress and then I will come back and address points. We are required to set these every 4 years under the Equality Act 2010, and they are intended to enable us to better fulfil the public sector equality duty, which is part of the Act. We have chosen to focus on 2 of our 3 outcomes on strengthening the collection, the analysis and publication of equality evidence, and on embedding lived experience and participation at the heart of our work. This reflects our commitment to ensuring that the voices of women and girls most affected by inequality shape our policies and decisions. So we will deliver a range of actions over the period to 2029 to achieve these outcomes. We will be creating resources to support Scottish Government staff to deliver participation and lived experience approaches, and looking at ways that we can make it easier for communities to engage with us and share their experiences. In relation to intersectional data and evidence, we are building on a well-established programme of work, which includes the 2023 publication of Scotland's Equality Evidence Strategy to 2025. Our strategy sets out actions to improve the equality evidence base across most policy areas. And we know, and it has been raised, that having good quality data helps us to better understand women's experiences and the barriers that they may encounter. It helps us to deliver better and more informed policy and to know when additional targeted measures are needed. But across government, we can also point to where lived experience approaches are making a difference right now. For example, our funding of the Sexual Assault Coordination Services, which the Cabinet Secretary mentioned, includes funding for a patient advocate who helps to ensure that women's lived experience is reflected in policy development. And, of course, the Empowering Women panel has been working directly with the Scottish Government civil servants on the design of our school-age childcare programme. I would like to come back to address some of the points that were raised, and the terminology of using sex and gender as interchangeable. I just wanted to make an attempt at explaining my view of that. Sex as a protected characteristic, and we accept the ruling of the Supreme Court. There is no ambiguity about that. Gender also is a word that signifies the stereotypes, the systemic and institutional and societal barriers that are gendered, for instance, on pay gap reporting. Both terms coexist and, in fact, they inform each other. And I think that that is the theme that comes through the National Advisory Council report that has been given to us and our response as a government. I would also like to address the point that was raised on non-fatal strangulation. We are aware and understand why Fiona Druitt has submitted her petition on non-fatal strangulation and recognise the significant physical and psychological impact that this type of criminality has on victims. The Scottish Government has committed to a comprehensive assessment of the law to see if further action needs to be taken, and will also look at the Criminal Justice Committee's evidence session on the 21st of May as part of that wider consideration in this area. I'd also like to address, I think it was Rona Mackay, Karen Adam and many others that talked about gender budgeting. We are, to give the Chamber reassurance, changing the way that we think about how, on our spending decisions, I'll finish my sentence, that can help women and girls through gender budgeting, including further pilot activity on gender budget tagging for the 2026-27 budget, which is building on our work with the OECD. I'll give way.
Tess White.
For taking an intervention. The National Performance Framework is set by the Scottish Government as the well-being for the whole of Scotland, but the concerns have been raised at committee level that there isn't a single outcome on gender equality. So I'd just like to say to the Minister, does she have a view on that?
Minister.
Yeah, I mean, you're referring to the use on, equality impact assessments will make sure, yes, that work is progressed. And I think the member will agree from evidence sessions that I've given at her committee, indeed, on the work that I am pursuing to make sure that we raise that standard across the whole of Scotland so that we can address the point that she raises. Thank you for that. I would just like to add something further to gender budgeting as well. On the 26th of February 2025, my Cabinet Secretary committed to developing a national gender strategy, which is co-designed with the NACWG and EWP, the Empowering Women panel, and wider groups of women with diverse lived experience as well. So I hope that gives some reassurance on gender budgeting and how we take that very seriously. Ms White talked about the pay gap. So although the median gender pay gap for full-time employees in Scotland increased over the year from 1.4% in 2023 to 2.2% for 24, it does continue to be narrower than the UK equivalent, which is sitting at 7% at the moment, and I thought it was worthwhile mentioning that. I also welcome the contributions that were made raising the issue of unpaid carers, and I think Karen Adam illustrated that very well, and the recognition that around 73% of unpaid carers are women. And I'd like to highlight the fact that this government is investing £522 million in 2025-26 to deliver 3 benefits to support unpaid carers. So, Presiding Officer, as I bring my remarks to a close, members, this debate afternoon marks the publication of the Scottish Government's first annual statement on gender policy coherence. It describes the significant range of activity going on across government to make the lives of women and girls in Scotland better, and it sets a benchmark against which we can measure progress in the years to come. The former UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan said, "Gender equality is more than a goal itself. It is a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, sustainable development promotion and building good governance." In this respect, we all have a stake in the realisation of greater equality for women and girls in Scotland.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate on progressing National Advisory Council on Women and Girls' recommendations on equality. It's now time to move on to the next item of business.